The Bram Weinstein Show on the new ESPN 630.
Boy, Washington played in Philadelphia like a month ago. I walked out of that going, I know they lost, but man, oh man, like they turned a corner. They put that Bills game behind them. We're just 2-2. That's probably what everybody expected them to be anyway with the schedule that they had. And here we go, guys. And ever since, it hadn't been great as we welcome in John Keim from ESPN and the John Keim Report. Let's do a little revisionist history. What did you think after they lost at Philadelphia was going to happen for the next few weeks before they played the Eagles again?
I thought they had turned a corner too. In not so much a moral victory, but what I liked is the way they handled the loss in the locker room. Because sometimes after those games, you'd hear like, oh, well, we went toe to toe with them, right? We did this, and yeah, it was a loss, but man, we saw a lot of good things. They were upset after that game, as upset as I've seen them after a loss in a while. And it felt like a playoff loss, right? And so I remember coming out of it thinking, one, I'm definitely picking them in the second time they play them. And two, maybe they turned a corner. And now did I think they're going to go to being a Super Bowl contender? Well, of course not. But I thought it would go from, I'm like, okay, they can win 9 or 10 games if they play like this and have this kind of mindset. And then 4 days later, they get drubbed by the Bears, and you're thinking, well, things have changed. So, with that day, I remember feeling similar to what you did. And again, not calling a moral victory, but just saying, like, I felt like there were things that I liked that I saw during the game and then after.
So this is totally revisionist and didn't happen, so it's an unfair question, but I'll ask it to you anyway. Let's just say they won. Like they went for 2-1 or they won in overtime. And everything that happened since is exactly the same, but they're 4-3, not 3-4. Do you think we would be talking about all the things that we would be talking about, like trade deadlines and all that stuff anyway?
Well, that's total revisionist history, so I don't know about that, Bram. I don't know. Like, I don't think so, because I think if you had won that game, then if people thinking like, hey, could you do it again? And now you're 5-3. But as much as that one, it's also, the New York game too, and you drop a ball on the 1 yard line, or there's this, and it wasn't just that play, but like it's the last one. So there's a lot of things you could say like that. But yeah, I mean, it would look dramatically different because you knew that you beat that good team, right? And I think then it's like, well, you beat them. Maybe even if you split with the Eagles and then you go up and beat the Patriots, you're 5-4, right? Next week, and you're still okay.
Right there. You're still right there.
I also think that for the psyche of the locker room, things would be different, and I just worry about where that could go with another loss, given the trade deadline coming up and all the speculation with that.
Yeah.
That's so. I think things will look a lot different just with that one. If whether it was a 2-point conversion or if McLaurin's if that play was ruled a catch initially, they're not overturning that. So you know what I mean? Like, so there's a lot of little things that, I mean, you could look back on those first 7 games and say, like, and you could do this but for both ways, right? But if you're a Commanders fan or a Commanders player or coach, you could say, like, hey, there's a couple plays, if this play and this play and this play gets made, then now you're 4-3 or 5-2.
Yeah, sure. But you could also could look at that Denver game and look at the Cardinals game and go, they could have lost either one of them. Yeah,
that's exactly. But and here's what I would say to that: that's the NFL.
Yeah,
like that happens every year. My son, who's a Browns fan for years, would be like, oh, well, they were 6-10 and they were close to all these games. Like, pal, every team is close to all these games. You know what I mean? Like, so don't take that. And then he's like, okay, and then they go 5-11. So. That's the NFL.
I mean, honestly, if you watch the Eagles this year, really more so than last year, they're a play or two away from having a very different record in a lot of these games. Yeah. And the funny part is, because I rewatched the Jets game that they lost a couple of weeks ago to get ready to call the game this weekend, and frankly, they're the ones that gave that one away. Like, they should have won. Yeah. So, like, it is everybody. Look at the 49ers the last couple of weeks. Yeah. You're on the razor's edge, even if you're a team that is considered elite. But the good teams win more of these games than they lose. Right. And that's why the Eagles are in a different category than everybody else right now.
Correct. Right. And that's exactly right. And that's, like, but I will say it's one thing to lose to the Bears. It's another thing to be down 27-3
I agree.
at halftime to the Bears. And, like the Giants game did not surprise me in one bit. Now, it surprised me not so much that they lost, but the way it unfolded.
250 yards of offense in the first half didn't surprise you with a no offensive line and a backup quarterback? Surprised me.
No. But the fact that it was a close game did not surprise me.
Right.
Say. Not at all. Now, that's the part that surprised me is how well they handled that. But then, they only, 14 points. And so the fact that they lost, I was a little bit surprised, but not really because weird things always happen up there. But yeah, the 250 part, yes, I was surprised by that.
All right, let me ask you, now that you've had a week to think about it, so their offense really cratered against the Bears and then really badly against the Giants last week, and they tried to dig themselves out of the hole and couldn't get out of it. All right. Throughout the week, we heard what I thought was diplomatic pointed criticism from Terry McLaurin right after the game. There were a lot of obvious mistakes when you watch the film, this time from the offensive line. Maybe a little bit, Hal was off. And then there's a lot of discussion of schematics and adjustments happening sooner. So with all of that kind of in mind, where have you landed on what happened last week and how they try to fix this stuff moving forward?
So when you go back and look at it, to me, I came away from the game thinking, man, like they just did a horrible job adjusting to that. And you watch what the Giants did early with the banged up line, like they won with a much worse offensive line than these guys had in that game. They right away were very much on okay, you're playing up. We're going to take 3 steps, 2 steps, and just throw a fade and complete a 33-yard pass and get rid of the ball in 1.7 seconds because now you can't get to our guy. So I felt like they adjusted from the start to what they had. It felt like Washington took a few series. Now, having said that, there are a couple plays that if this is part of this is I don't know if this is just the young offense growing, a young quarterback growing. I know one of the things that McLaurin wanted were some more crossing routes early. Well, it's like you go back and there's like second or third play of the game, and I was just watching this a little bit ago. There's a crossing pattern where Howell ends up taking a deeper drop, and I don't know, maybe he should have taken a 3-step instead of 5-step. 3-step, you get the ball off. 5-step, he got sacked. And I don't know whose fault it was, but the point is they ran that. And I know McLaurin ran one fade route in the first half, but they didn't throw it to him. And even when he was talking about that, he's like, it's not just him. It's Jahan Dotson can do this. It's, De'Ami Brown can do that. So it's like they have other guys who can do it. It's just it was a little bit slow to then get to it at times until the second half. So I think, but then if you're the coach, you say, yeah, okay, well, we got to adjust here. However, you couldn't pick up a basic stunt. Like, that's a problem. That's not in the scheme. That's on you. Nick Gates getting handled by Lawrence. It's not the scheme. That's him, right? So there was some of that too. And then even with Sam Howell, there were a couple throws that you make that the interception, the play is there.
Yeah.
There was a 3rd and 5. I think you and I talked
with
about
Logan Thomas. He missed.
Logan Thomas.
Yeah.
That he misses that, and so there were plays to be made. So to me, it's always a combination of things. I don't think that I think they could have adjusted a little bit earlier, but I don't pin it all on that. The way I thought after leaving the stadium.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me ask about Bieniemy then, just because, and let's take it from the first Eagles game. The Bears game, they started extremely slowly. It was a terrible first half, and then they tried to climb out of it, and they kind of didn't. And then the game went sideways. They threw the ball 55 times in a row. Then in Atlanta, they took advantage of a lot of mistakes, and they won, but the offense actually didn't really move the ball very much, and 2 of the scores were on short fields, right? It was the punt return by Crowder and then an interception. And I want to give them credit. They scored on the short fields, and actually the one great thing that's come out of this so far is red zone efficiency. They've actually been very good this year and been very creative down there. That's the good thing. But on long fields, that's 2 weeks in a row that they literally cannot score. And then last week, we know what happened. Their offense could do literally nothing for the variety of reasons that we just talked about and you talked about. And then they ended up with 7 points. And again, the yardage totals are down and Hal's numbers are really down. And then we heard what McLaurin said, which was diplomatically critical. So let me ask you this, because my concern early with Bieniemy was this is a coaching style that maybe not everybody will take to, but that's fine. We're going to find out who's dealing with it. As the summer progressed, I did wonder, is he open-minded to collaboration and input from his players? And I think here we are in week 8, and I think that's a fair question. Do you think he is open to collaboration with his players?
I can't say for sure. And it's funny because I asked Ron Rivera something along those lines, like when, the difference between a confident coach and a stubborn one.
Uh-huh.
And a confident one is one who takes input from players, right? And you make adjustments. They feel like some of those adjustments have been made. And again, I point out to the Giants game where you say, okay, well, they got to do this and this. And you say, well, actually, we did do that, and you guys got to do this. So, but I don't know. I think there's a little bit of a slowness to that kind of situation. I would say that's the way it feels.
Yeah.
I would say and it's not, and that's why I asked, because every coach you're going to have that. Well, not everything a player says is good or accurate. It's through their prism. So you need to take some of that stuff into account because they're the guys on the field. And if McLaurin, the problem that I have with it is with McLaurin is so important to this offense that you need to get him involved early. And if for no other reason, he provides as emotional lift as anybody on that team when he's involved early. And their record when he's involved early is just much better. When he's got even the first quarter, 2 or 3 targets in the first quarter, or maybe it's 3 or more, 3 or 4 targets in the first quarter, the record is just better because he's involved. They're not relying on him, but he's involved. And so, you need to get that. That's where they're a little bit slow to get that stuff. And I also think, some of it, but I don't know, I know that McLaurin, they heard what he said, and I think if the whole thing is, well, would it make a difference? I think the answer is we'll see. So I don't know, and I think we'll see. But I would say that at a certain point, you have to be open-minded because it's not developing the way you need it to be developing. And if you don't get a little bit more open-minded, then I think this thing can go off the rails.
Yeah, I think it could too. All right, we all know what this weekend is. Let me start before I ask specifically about players that you think may or may not be on the move. Do you think the outcome of the game this weekend will, if they were to win, would that prohibit them from potentially moving forward with a couple of moves, or do you think that ship has sailed here?
I think possibly, because I say possibly because I think it depends who you ask. And, I haven't talked to Josh Harris about this, right? So I think for him, it's still going to be what's the best move for the franchise. I think if you're the coaches, you might say it's a moot point because, listen, you're 4-4 and you have a shot now. Because what if you go up to New England, you win? Now you're 5-4, you're right back. You're right there. And I think it depends on who you ask for, if it depends or not. And then it's like, well, if you're not, because here's the problem. If you're a McLaurin and John Allen, guys like that, and you go and trade Montez Sweat after a win like that, what the hell are you doing? What does that do to the locker room? You're just, you know what I mean? They're going to feel like you just punted on the season.
Yeah.
So you have to be mindful of that. However, you also have to be mindful of the guy. If you don't think you're going to re-sign these guys because you just it's the value isn't there, whatever the reason is, and you have a chance to get a draft pick now versus in 2025 is a possible draft pick because that compensatory stuff is all dependent on a formula, and maybe you sign a few players this offseason that negates your compensatory picks.
Yeah.
Right? So I think you have to be mindful of all of that and do what's best. But I do think it could change the direction. Whether it should or not, that's a different question. But I think for some it would. But again, what if they say second round pick for Montez Sweat?
Right.
I mean, and you say listen, take it, but or is Josh Harris going to say, all right, Ron, you guys are 4-4. You're right there. You go do it.
Well, I mean, that's the tricky part here. I mean, the ownership has not done anything tangible that we know about that's exerted pressure on the football side of the ball. I think they've been kind of true to this promise. They'd let this thing play out, but this is the first time that they do need to weigh in. If they do make moves, especially with prominent players like Sweat or Young, it does undermine that. But then again, if they are 3 and 5 and you can't keep both of them anyway, even if you wanted to, then don't you have to do this? So they're in an interesting spot for sure.
They are, and I think if you're 3 and 5, you owe it to it. And it doesn't mean even at that point it's like, listen, you can plug in. They played okay on defense without Chase Young and Montez Sweat on the field. In the past, they have done okay without those guys on the field. So you can point to that and say, like, yes, we did this, but we've done this in the past without these guys. So that's one way but good luck selling that to guys like McLaurin and some of the other guys in there. That's the problem. But if you're and it's also, I think there's been a different tone lately, which is the season's about Sam Howell's development.
Mm-hmm.
You need to find out about him. And I would say in year 4, for a lot of other guys, that's not what they're here for. Like John Allen was legit ticked off after that game last week. It's not because he's wondering about Sam Howell's development, because he wants to make the playoffs and do something. And he's made it once in his time here.
Have you talked to him subsequently this week? Did you talk to him? Because I have not this week.
I briefly, but not a lot. So he did a scrum in the locker room with the media. Is it Wednesday? I think. So. Yeah.
Like he wasn't suggesting he doesn't want to be here, right? Like he wasn't.
No. I think he's suggesting I think we know what he was suggesting. He's tired of this. And who blames him? I mean, who isn't tired of this? I mean, we have to cover this stuff. Like, who isn't tired of bad football? You know what I mean? Like, seriously, like fans are tired of it. And I don't blame them. I mean, we sometimes catch some of the strap, the whatever from that, but I don't blame them. They should be upset. They should not accept this. And I think because there were so many positive vibes this summer, the glow of the Josh Harris arrival, that the reality of the season about where are they really at, it wasn't going to be Josh Harris comes in and suddenly they're great. This is still a transition period for this organization.
Yeah. All right, so let me ask about the prominent 2 players that we would think a market for. Montez Sweat, Chase Young. What do you know right now? What is your expectation over the next 72 hours or so with both of them?
So the one offer that we know for sure was it with Montez. How firm that offer was, I don't know, because at one point I heard it was as much a, hey, if we gave you guys this, what would you think? So, but that's out there. So I think that's one of those revisit Sunday night, Monday morning, and then possibly make a move. So that's it. I have not heard that with Chase Young. So I have not heard any offers for him. And the other thing, Bram, I would point out, like, it's not like I do not expect some fire sale that Josh Harris is going to say, you guys just get rid of all these guys. Because first of all, not everybody has a market, so you can't do that. And secondly, I think that it's got to be the right value, and that's where Montez seems to be the one that you could get the value for. With Chase Young, I think people still want to see, and I think you'd be more apt to maybe try and keep Montez Sweat over Young. I think long term, because I think you may have you want to get more of a read on his approach and on the injury, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's where Montez may have a little bit better. And I think you probably Chase Young can make bigger plays, but I think Montez Sweat might be more of a consistent player for what he does.
I mean, so
that's why.
As I've been thinking about this, like I do think one of them is going to be traded. I just think it's just asset management. I mean, they're both not going to be here.
We're talking one.
Yes.
Right? If we're talking one of them, it would be Montez.
That's what I think. And I also think logically it would make more sense if Chase Young is going to continue to have the season he's having this year and that were to continue through the rest of the year. He is going to have double-digit sacks, maybe 14, 15 of them. That's what he's on pace for. He's going to be top 10 in pressures. Because of his name, he might make a Pro Bowl off of something like that. I mean, frankly, I would consider putting a non-exclusive franchise tag on him and then surveying a marketplace that's different than in the middle of the season where teams are more apt to make maybe the type of deal that you actually want if you don't want to re-sign him. But I don't think I would say the same thing about Montez Sweat. So that's why I think, to me, the right choice if you're going to trade one of them is to trade Sweat now and deal with Young later. And, you still might come around to, I want to sign him long term. You can choose to do that after the season.
Well, it also depends on who's making that call because we don't know that right now. Like, if it gets bad, then it's not going to be this group. It'll be a different group. So that's why you're not going to – I think that's why, there haven't really been any serious negotiations going on with – I don't even serious. I don't think there's been any negotiations going on with any of the potential free agents. And there are a few of them. Antonio Gibson's one, Cam Curl's one, and, Curtis Samuel. So I think Curl is a guy that I would say – I would figure he'll be back next year, but again, we don't know who we don't know who the coaching staff will. We don't know who the GM will be. Unless this group recovers and returns, it's going to be a different group making that decision. So you're not going to, so you could give them okay, you have Chase Young. If you don't want him, under your scenario, if nobody offers you a good pick, you bring him back. He's going to play for another contract.
Play on a tag.
Then you make a decision.
Yes.
Yeah, then you make a decision. Do you want to keep him or not? Do you want us to extend him or not? Because now you only have one of them, and you're going to have the John Allen and all that. They're going to get to a point where they can get out. If you want to move on from that in a year or so,
or restructure.
You're going to have the ability.
You're going to have to restructure.
Or
That's
do
right.
something. Right. But you can do something with the contract to make it palatable to keep them all. But the other thing I would wonder, Bram, too, is the Harris Group is huge on analytics. And so if you're looking at analytics, what do they say about investing so heavily in one position
That's
group?
right.
That's where I would also look at that as well to see, and I don't think it's rare that you invest that much into one group. You want to spread around, especially when it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
Especially when it hasn't worked.
All right. Great times. I'll see you at FedEx Field on Sunday. Eagles Commanders Part 2. Thanks, John, as always.
All right. Thanks.
All right. It's John Keim from ESPN, John Keim Report. All right. We'll do a preview of the rest of the Week 8 slate next. Bram, watch the show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.